people would say, well, what does your gut say? And I would be like, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know what my gut says. I felt so out of touch with that. Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. I am recording today's episode exactly 1 month after The Details launched. And I wanted to start by first just saying thank you so much to everyone who has been following the journey, everyone who has listened along, and for all the just words of encouragement and messages that tell me that this has touched you or that this has meant something. It truly means the world to me to hear that. And secondly, if you are new to The Details, if this is your first episode, then let me welcome you. I hope you go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes and that you find today's episode to be useful. In that first episode, I shared that I would be doing some solo episodes. And since I've now recorded 10 guest interviews, I thought it was time for me to come back on here and share a little bit myself. So as I was thinking about what to say or what topics to cover during these solo episodes, I actually started rereading some of my old journal entries from the time when I was navigating my divorce process. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little daunted to think about reading back and going back to that really raw and vulnerable place. But as I started reading back, it just brought up so many emotions, and it really made me have a lot of empathy and compassion for this earlier version of myself. And I thought that if I shared some of this with you, if you might be going through something similar, it might be helpful. So what I thought I would do today is just drop us into a specific moment in my journey. I won't do this all chronologically and start at the beginning and work our way through, but I'll just drop us into a moment today. And that specific moment for me is kind of one of the hardest moments of the divorce journey for me, which was the contemplation discernment phase. That was definitely the part that I personally found to be the hardest. And so if you are in that space, or if you are reflecting back on what this space felt like for you, I hope this episode will be useful to you. So let's drop into January 4th, 2017. The past few weeks have been incredibly difficult. My mom had to have emergency surgery the Wednesday before Christmas, and my close friend took her own life. Fortunately, Mom appears to be recovering well after 10 days in the hospital, but the concurrence of these events with my marital struggles has been overwhelming. On my walk yesterday, I tried to reflect on what I'm supposed to do, feel, and learn through these difficult experiences, because I can't control or influence the outcomes of at least some of these events. 1, life is short, and there are no guarantees for how much time we have together on this earth. 2, everyone just wants to be happy, though people define happiness differently. 3, family, friendship, and personal connections are paramount, even though relationships can be tricky. 4, strength and vulnerability are not mutually exclusive. I don't have answers right now, but I do have a lot of questions. What makes me happy and unhappy? What gives my life meaning? What is my purpose? These are big questions, the ones that life or death scenarios propel us to consider. Through self-reflection, research, therapy, and discussions with friends, family, and colleagues, I resolved to find answers to these questions in 2017. Fast forward, and the next entry picks up after a therapy session I had. My therapist tells me that her wish for me is to find my voice. Either I am not communicating effectively, or others don't listen to me, or both. It's frustrating to feel that I am speaking up and not being heard. And it's scary to think about saying everything that's in my head and my heart. I'm trying to listen to my gut, but what if I say something I regret and I can't take it back? What if the pain I cause is irreversible? I'm growing increasingly impatient with myself. As a friend asked me on Friday, what new information do you need? I've been in limbo for a while, and it's time to make decisions. If I need time to gather more information, fine. But I need to actually do the work and take steps forward instead of living my life passively and in fear. So I wrote that at the very beginning of 2017, January of that year. I had been married just over 3 years, and it was still a year and a half until my divorce was finalized. And as I think back on that time of contemplation and what it felt like, for me, it was endless questioning, journaling, talking, reflecting. I was just stuck in this loop of, should we stay together? Should we end things? And it felt paralyzing, to be honest. And it was also exhausting. I think I mentioned this in my first episode, but at the time I was working an incredibly intense job in management consulting. I was on the road 4 days a week traveling. And so I would leave Monday morning. I would get back home pretty late Thursday night. And then because of all of my travel, our therapy sessions were scheduled for Saturdays. And turns out I had an individual therapist and a couples therapist who were different people, but in the same office building. And there were many weekends where I would go sort of straight from one appointment to the next. I would have a couples therapy appointment and then an hour break and then go straight into an individual therapy appointment or vice versa. And I would get home from those appointments and just nap for like 2 to 3 hours because I was just so physically and emotionally exhausted. Starting to get a little choked up right now. And I was constantly looking outside of myself for answers to these questions of, how do I decide? How do I know if this is the right decision for me? And I forgot this until I was reading back through some of these journal entries, but one of the books that I read was called Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay. And the book had 36 diagnostic questions around what it's called is like ambivalence or, relationship or marital ambivalence. And I hated that term because to me, ambivalence signals that you don't care, right? Like, oh, I'm ambivalent. Like I could go this way, I could go that way. And like, that's the opposite. I mean, this felt like a life or death decision to me. So it did not feel like ambivalence, but this choice, this book outlined 36 diagnostic questions. And so in my journal, I wrote down, my responses to each of those diagnostic questions. And it was yes or no through each of these. So I'm just flipping through here and it's yes, no, 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 maybe, yes, no, 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 maybe, no, yes, maybe, like all over the place. And, the final question that is in here, let's see if I can flip to it here. The final question in here is, if all the problems in your relationship were magically solved today, would you still feel ambivalent about whether to stay or leave? And my response at the time was, I don't know, ... That's the $1 million question. So even a book in 36 questions could not get me to what the right answer was. I referenced in that last journal entry some of the questions that my friends asked me at the time. One was, what are you waiting for? Or what new information do you need? And, after that, people would say, well, what does your gut say? well, trust your intuition, trust your inner voice. Like, what does your gut say? And I would be like, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know what my gut says. I felt so out of touch with that. So let's fast forward to February 4th of that same year. So this is about a month after that first journal entry that I wrote. I said, I'm still not 100% sure what to do. I just reread my journals and it's been interesting and revealing. I had identified the same issues that we're dealing with now in our marriage today back in August of 2015, which was about a year and a half prior. 6 months ago, I realized I wanted to end our marriage. While I have been sad, confused, fearful, and overwhelmed since then, I have not meaningfully changed my mind and decided that I want to recommit to my marriage. So why can't I just make a decision? What's holding me back? Ultimately, I do need to make a decision. I've felt this way for a long time now, and while I've been sad and confused, my feelings haven't changed. We can't give each other what the other needs, and we both deserve happiness. I need to pray for the wisdom, the strength, and the courage to make a decision and act on it. When I read that back, what I realize now is that I did know at the time. I said I didn't, and when people would ask me what my gut said, and I said I didn't know, I did know. It's written in my journal. And yet it still took over a year from that point for us to call it, to make the decision to end our marriage. And a year and a half from that point to when our divorce was finalized. And it's hard to look back and see the discrepancy between knowing and the not trusting myself in knowing. And I think what that's driven by is just this total lack of self-trust. I had spent my entire life up until that point, and frankly, several years after the divorce, really so focused on external validation and the shoulds in life, and not letting people down, not disappointing them, meeting other people's expectations, and being so out of touch with what I wanted, what I thought that I needed, and being able to claim it as well. So even if I was able to write it down in a journal, I really struggled, as you heard there, to be able to say it out loud, to ask for what I needed. And as a result, that lack of communication, we couldn't even in therapy solve the things that were maybe the root causes because I couldn't communicate effectively what I wanted and needed. It's really hard to look back on that. And I have so much empathy for that earlier version of myself who just didn't know. And that lack of self-trust was the main driver of the fear that I felt. I talked about this in the first episode I recorded about all of the different fears that I had through this process. But one of the biggest fears was the fear of regretting a decision. If I trusted myself fully, if I made that decision and I made the wrong decision and regretted it, it felt like it would be catastrophic. And so instead, I stayed in that space of limbo. And while it was incredibly painful, I think it felt safer because if I didn't decide, then I didn't have to face that fear of potential regret. And now it's clear to me that indecision wasn't a lack of choosing, it was a choice in and of itself. I have been reflecting a lot lately, and I was at a conference 2 weeks ago where I heard Bozoma St. John speak. She was one of the keynote speakers. And if you don't know her, she's the former CMO of Netflix, and she was at Uber for a while. And she's just a larger than life personality. And she was talking about the need for us to trust our intuition. And what she said really resonated with me is that, you know, if our intuition speaks to us and we say, no, stop, like, be quiet. And you instead listen to all of those external voices. And if it speaks up again and you say, no, stop, I'm not listening to you, and you listen externally, over time, that gut, that inner voice, that intuition just gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And so when I said that, when people would ask, well, what does your gut say? And I don't know. I don't have one. Like, I did have one. It was just so quiet because I never listened to it. I didn't give it the chance to speak up. And so it stopped talking to me. And so what Bozoma St. John says is, when you start listening to that intuition, when you start following what it's telling you, it starts to get louder and louder and louder, to the point where it's actually roaring. She said that her intuition roars. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm at that point right now, but I will say over the past couple of years, I have started to cultivate that inner knowing, that intuition, that inner voice, that gut, whatever you want to call it. And I can hear it now. I couldn't hear it then. It didn't mean that it didn't exist, but I couldn't hear it and I wasn't listening to it. And now what I know is that every time I listen to that voice, every time I follow that direction, sometimes even if I don't understand why, it always leads me to maybe not the best place, but it leads me to so much learning and so many opportunities that I otherwise wouldn't have. And it's part of what led me to make the decision to move from Chicago to Santa Monica. It's part of what led me to make a massive career pivot. It's part of what led me to launch this podcast. And it's part of what led me to pick that journal entry and pick what I'm talking about to you today. So hopefully it didn't steer me wrong there. And so if you find yourself in that place of contemplation or discernment, the question that I have for you is, do you need more information? Or do you just need more courage? And my wish for you is that you can get in touch with that intuition and that inner voice and that gut for yourself. And you may say, I don't have it, or it's not there. But what I would say is, it is there. It may not be loud. It may not have spoken to you in a while because other voices have been louder. But if you can find a way to get still and listen, I have faith that you will hear something. And so the answer to that question of, do I need more information or do I need more courage? Your gut probably knows the answer to that question. And the answer to that question is really what guides what comes next. And in terms of how we got to that final decision after all of this back and forth and discernment, well, that's a story for another time. With that, thank you so much for joining for this second solo episode. And I would love to hear directly from you. Send me a DM on Instagram at The Details Podcast. Let me know where you are in your journey. And if you're in that contemplation phase, I would love to hear if today's episode resonated with you. I read every single DM, so please send them my way and I'll definitely get back in touch with you. And if you want to help other people that may be in this phase, I would so greatly appreciate if you would rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the single thing you can do to help this show reach more people who want and need to hear their messages. So thank you so much. And honestly, I'm so grateful for you taking the time to listen today and to listen to the other episodes. I don't take for granted that you have limited time and so many different things you could be listening to. So thanks for spending this time with me. And I look forward to seeing you next week on The Details. Bye. Thanks for listening to The Details with Allison Kahler. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. New episodes drop every Tuesday.